Good morning, Mike. How are you? Ready to have a drink?
Yes, sir. How's it going, Anwar?
It's going fantastic. How are you doing?
Oh, I mean, it's been a morning, but I'm fired up now that I'm on here with you. I'm ready to talk some Texas, and we have been over at that SEC podcast. We have embraced Texas and Oklahoma into the SEC. I can't wait till it's official, but in our minds, it's official already.
Yeah, well, Mike, I mean, because you already know, Mike, that the Big 12 doesn't embrace Texas anymore. Like you already know how your Mark feels about Texas. You actually didn't like that. You were a little thrown off, a little offended by that. Give us your thoughts on what your Mark said about Texas recently.
Well, I think that's just the latest sign that Texas and Oklahoma making the right decision, getting out of the Pee Wee leagues and coming to the major leagues. But yeah, I mean, that I'll just tell you, I mean, I don't think this is a newsflash to any Longhorn fans, but you'll never see anything like that from Greg Sankey. There's a reason that most people consider him the leader in college athletics. And you know, I don't sit here and suck up to Sankey. If he messes up, I call him on it. But I am grateful for him because if not for him, I don't think there would have been football during the COVID year. And that's really when my show really took off. So in a sense, I feel indebted to Greg Sankey, and Texas is going to be in good hands as soon as they join the SEC.
Um, Mike, one of the things that wanted to get to, and it was interesting because I know you've said this before. You've said it on your podcast. You said it on Feinbaum as well. You've been a person that hasn't really been buying the Bama Kool-Aid, especially this season. I want to get into the why. And by the way, that puts you in the minority, right? Like that if there's a party to be had, it's like a party of two or three at that point. Give me though the understanding and take me into your mind as to why you're thinking maybe the legacy is over for Saban at Alabama.
Yeah, absolutely. I've coined the phrase. I probably should trademark this before someone else does, but I call it the decaying dynasty there in Tuscaloosa. And Saturday could be just the latest example of that. But, you know, before I get into that, I will give them credit. They looked pretty good week one. MTSU, they blew their doors off. That was one of the most impressive performances I saw week one. And I only watch SEC, and I include Texas and Oklahoma in that. So I was impressed. Jalen Milroe looked good. He looked as good as he's ever looked. But again, MTSU, would not get too over my skis on that one. But why the decaying dynasty? Well, because there's no difference between their roster and Georgia's the last couple of years. There's none. And even a blind man could see Georgia's on a different level. And that is with Alabama having the best quarterback in the game, who just went number 1 overall in the draft, the best defensive player in the game, who went number 3 overall in the draft, and they couldn't even win their division. And Georgia also, in this era of transfer portal, if you're a new coach, I get it. You got to bring in guys to shore up deficiencies. But Alabama's been doing this for a while now. They had to bring in Jamison Williams from Ohio State. I mean, he was a playmaker. I get it. But they had to bring in Jermaine Burton from Georgia to shore up their receiving core. They needed a left tackle from Vanderbilt to shore up their offensive line. They have been missing time after time on the offensive line, and they're signing 5 stars, but they're not developing them. They're not getting them to the NFL. They had to bring in Jahmyr Gibbs at running back last year. I mean, all over the roster. Henry To'oTo'o at linebacker. They've had to bring in some secondary players this year. And again, that's fine if you're LSU and you're Brian Kelly and you just took over the job. But this is Nick Saban, and he gets virtually whoever he wants in recruiting. Yet year after year, they're having to go to the portal to shore up this deficiency, that deficiency. I don't know if you're familiar with Dave Bartu, CFB Matrix, but he's one of a kind. And what he does this professionally. It's not just some guy putting stuff on Twitter. He helps coaching searches. And what he does specifically, if you have, let's say, an open running back position, you reach out to his service, you tell him what kind of running back you're looking, running backs coach, recruiter, developer of talent, and he can give you a list in a minute because he's got a spreadsheet on everybody.
Oh,
so
wow.
he charts all these coaches, their entire career, and FCS now. He does FCS too. He charts all this stuff. And according to Dave Bartu, this is the worst coaching staff Nick Saban has ever put together. He doesn't have a single assistant and this is coordinators included, that rank in the top 2 at their position in the SEC. And there's only 2 coaching staffs in the entire SEC that can say that: Alabama and Vanderbilt. So this is
Wow.
not an elite staff. There's
Wow.
deficiencies all over the roster. And you hear these people. I mean, I got respect for Kurt Herbstreit and all these people, but listen to what they say when they pick Alabama to win the SEC, to win the national championship. What do they say? I believe in Nick Saban, and you doubt him, and he'll come and get you. Well, that's great. I picked Alabama last year. That didn't work out either. That's not logic to say, well, he's done it for 20 years, he'll do it now. Georgia is vastly superior than Alabama. I think A&M, I know that's probably the wrong thing to say on this show, but I think okay. A&M may beat them this year. Hell, I think Texas might beat them this weekend. So this is going to be their first true test, and I would not be stunned at all if Texas goes into Tuscaloosa and comes away with a win.
Told you guys you love him. Michael Bratton from the SEC podcast. You know, and one of the things I have said, and this has been my theory, and I want to see if you agree with me. I feel like people only complain about the things that bother them and typically affect them the most, right? That's usually how we are and approach things in life. And the one thing we've heard him complain about, Saban, that I'm talking about, is NIL. He complains about it every offseason. He attacked A&M a couple of years ago. He's complained about it this offseason. My theory has been about this, is that the state of Alabama is not going to produce any more millionaires, or at least and they'll produce millionaires, but not at the rate that Texas will produce millionaires or some other states. And I feel like NIL has become the great equalizer for a lot of programs because, look, we understand that there's a lot of things that would happen under the table. Well, now everything's happening above the table. And so now all of a sudden, it's not the brown paper bags anymore. It's your collectives and those things. And I'm not accusing a Saban or anything to that effect, but I'm just saying, like, I feel like he's bothered by it because he knows that when it comes to this world, they may not be able to compete like the way they used to. Your thoughts on just kind of that? My theory is that the NIL is the thing that bothers him the most because that's the toughest area for him to compete.
Yeah, 1,000%. And you go back to him. I don't know if we're allowed to curse on here, so I won't.
Yes, you can. Okay. Say whatever the hell you want to.
You go back to him bitching and complaining about Jimbo Fisher, and they bought everybody on their team. Well, hell, Alabama's been doing that for years. It wasn't legal, and no one was going to turn them in. And you saw it even when I'm a Tennessee grad, Jeremy Pruitt, when he came to Tennessee, that it was the same deal. And where did he learn that? He learned it from Nick Saban. And there was one incident in particular where a Tennessee player got arrested, and for some reason in the middle of the night they called Jeremy Pruitt, and Jeremy says, "What in the shit is this? Where I come from, this is not an issue. If he's a player, you get him off the line." So yeah, Alabama's been skirting the rules for a long time, and you're 100% right. Now that it's legal across the board, he's having an issue. That's Kirby Smart had the same issue because they're doing the same thing down in Athens, and more power to them. I support all the players getting paid. This is America. If someone wants to give you $1 million, I don't care. If someone wants to give you $10 million, then you're worth $10 million. Take that money. All these coaches are taking it. The schools are taking it. The conferences, the television contracts, they're all taking money. So don't come at me with these players getting some coin that Nick Saban's making $10 million. He's mad now that he's got Lyman making $50,000. It's a joke. And you're absolutely right. And NIL is helping. You just saw this recently. I don't know how in tune you guys are with SEC recruiting, but Missouri just landed the number one prospect in the country about a month ago. He was an in-state guy, and yes, the NIL laws in that state helped them. And I saw a lot of SEC fans freak out about this, and I'm sitting here wondering why. Because this is what we wanted. We don't want college football to be Georgia and Alabama and Ohio State and one other team every year competing for the national championship. We want more teams. And how is that possible? By getting elite players to other schools. Now, I'm not sitting here saying Missouri is going to win a national championship, but they got a hell of a lot closer when they signed the number one prospect. I don't care how they did it. And you're right. It's helping A&M. It's helping Texas. It's helping Tennessee. So I'm massively in favor of it. And certainly I think it's hurting Alabama. And when Saban was bitching and complaining, where was he doing it? He was doing it in front of a room full of boosters. And he was pissing and moaning that we signed the number 2 recruiting class, a class that almost anybody in the country would have killed for. And what happened? They started to donate and they signed the number 1 class. So, hey, I guess it worked for him, but I thought it was a horrible look.
No, I'm with you. And SEC Mike for the SEC podcast, tell me you got boots on the ground, so you've been able to see this. How has Georgia become or surpassed Alabama in that conference? Like, was it strictly recruiting? Is Kirby Smart just kind of that superior of a coach? I know you mentioned things about coaching staffs, but for years it was just Bama and then everybody else in the SEC. What did Georgia do to become that dominant program that now everyone is trying to catch up to?
Well, Georgia's just been strong on the line of scrimmage. That's been paramount to that, and you see that with Jalen Carter, who was a top pick in the NFL. There just wasn't another Jalen Carter out there. He was key to wins over Ohio State, Tennessee. He was a complete game wrecker against Tennessee, and I've been told that in the Alabama games, there was about 12 matchups where they isolated Jalen Carter one-on-one, and those were the keys to the game. I mean, he was simply unblockable. Now it's not just one guy, because Georgia sent about 7, 8 guys here in the first round on the defensive line the last couple of years, but that's been the difference. And they're stronger on the offensive line too. So where Alabama went more quarterback and receiver, that was the strengths of their team. They've not had those receivers in recent years. They don't have those receivers now. They have I think a good collection of guys, but they don't have a first round. They probably don't even have a second round pick at receiver right now on that roster. So Georgia more dominant in the line of scrimmage with, I don't think anybody is dumb enough to say Stetson Bennett's better than Bryce Young, which we all, focus so much on the quarterbacks, but Georgia's been dominant on the line of scrimmage. That's been paramount. And going back to what I was saying about Alabama and having to bring in all these transfers, that's one thing Kirby Smart, up until this year, he brought in a couple of transfer receivers, but the last 2 national championship rosters are almost exclusively guys that he signed and developed in the high school ranks. And I think that's a sign of the development, and the recruiting has been a little bit better in Athens.
Tell me, before we get a little bit more into the things that happened, the Texas and the Alabama thing, I want to kind of get your thoughts on week 1 around the SEC, right? So we were able to see, some of the victories, but we also see South Carolina lose to North Carolina. We saw LSU get spanked. We saw Florida get spanked by Utah. I mean, give us the understanding of, is that just how those programs are? Because the outside looking in has always been belief that the SEC is a little bit top heavy as well. But I kind of want to get your perspective on what you saw in week 1. Were there any surprises for you at all?
Yeah, this is one of the worst weekends of my life. I'm the guy out here waving the flag for the SEC, and they embarrassed me on Thursday evening with Florida getting just steamrolled by Utah, with Utah playing with a lot of backups, including a walk-on quarterback. That was god-awful. Saturday night, South Carolina embarrassed me. And then Sunday, I should put this out there so that people know. Maybe don't take anything I say with you take it all with a grain of salt, because I picked LSU in the preseason to win the West, to win the national championship. Now I look like the biggest idiot in the world, which I kind of am, but that was horribly embarrassing. So, I couldn't believe it. And anyone kicking the SEC right now, I think that's fair, because those are essentially the 3 big matchups that people were going to look at, and the SEC came up short in all of them. So that's fair. But at the same time, Florida, I think I picked them 5th, maybe 5th, or no, I picked them 6th in the East. I picked South Carolina 5th in the East, and the East is the weaker side of the SEC. So to say South Carolina and Florida got embarrassed, which is true, that's not that revealing given who they were playing, and it's not like those were the 2 best teams in the SEC. LSU is the one I think that I really have egg on my face, because I thought they'd be a lot better. And in fairness, they lost week 1 last year, and they still won the West. So they could make a rebound, but they certainly don't look like it. And then across the SEC, like I said, Alabama was wildly impressive. A&M with Bobby Petrino, this is what I've been waiting for. I think the hype is finally real. But again, we'll see. They play at Miami this weekend. That'll be the true test. Impressed with them. Tennessee, they didn't even play that good of a game. They won by 40 points. So I think Tennessee's legit once again. And, I mean, there was a lot of cupcake games. Auburn looked pretty good under Hugh Freeze. He's a scumbag, but he's a good coach. So, I mean, I don't know how I'd feel about that if I'm an Auburn fan, but really all they care about is winning. So good for them.
by the way, Benji is correct when he says Mike holds no prisoners. That is 100%. By the way, if you guys take advantage, if you guys actually have some questions for Mike, get those things in the chat right now. If he has enough time, we'll go ahead and answer some of them. So go ahead and hit that up. I got one more Bama question for you, and then I want to talk about Texas, Alabama as well. How long does Saban hold on, do you think? And if this thing plays out the way that you think it might play out, if you feel like this is the decline is about to happen, I mean, he's not getting any younger, NIL is not helping him. At what point is he waiting to hand it off to somebody like some people would do, or is he out within the next couple of years? I just want to get your thoughts.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think this season will really kind of dictate that, particularly if Georgia wins yet again. And next season, I'm trying not to look ahead to 2024. It's going to be an exciting season. But Georgia plays at Alabama. If Georgia wins 3 national championships in a row and then go to Tuscaloosa the next year and just smash Alabama, I mean, I think we may see him pull a Steve Spurrier and quit in the middle of the year. Because, I mean, I think he'll be over and done with. So he just bought a $17 million Florida mansion. I don't know if you saw this, but
oh, wow.
He's going to be living right next to Tiger Woods. And for people to say, well, he's got the money, he can have a vacation home. That's true. He's already got one beach house in Florida. He's already got a lake house in Georgia. He's got a mansion in Tuscaloosa. I mean, how many mansions does this guy need? This certainly feels like he just bought his retirement home. $17 million right on the beach there in Florida. So, yeah, I mean, I think the end is near. I think if they win it all this year, he could retire. I think if Georgia wins it again, he could retire as well, because it's laughable to say they have a dynasty when hell it's Georgia right now. I don't call them a dynasty right now, but they control the sport right now.
Absolutely. By the way, did Darwin have a question, Aaron? All right, Darwin's got a question for you. Darwin's a good contributor for us. And so, Mike, he asked you, where do you see UT and OU finishing year one in the SEC? By the way, Mike, I know you got to get used to this. Most of these people here think of UT as Texas and not Tennessee. I know you're a Tennessee guy. Yeah. That's going to throw you off a little bit, but he does mean the University of Texas. Your thoughts on them first year in the SEC?
Yeah, I was about to say Tennessee's going to win it. Of course. Come on now. But yeah, I mean, I'll be completely honest with you. So I'm spending this season getting to know Texas and Oklahoma. So I'm still kind of a novice when it comes to my knowledge on them. But again, I'm trying not to overreact to 1 week or anything, but I thought Oklahoma was wildly impressive. I mean, I don't even know. Again, Brent Venables, I'm not convinced he makes it to life in the SEC. If they just kind of crater here, I think they got to pull the plug, bring in a real coach. But again, they were wildly impressive week 1. And Texas, I'm spending this season to get to know them, but I've heard so much hype about Quinn Ewers and these receivers, and particularly the offensive line, which is where I was told they've been spending so much time and resources and building up the line of scrimmage. I was not impressed with the offensive line against Rice. Now, again, week 1, I'm not saying Texas is trash or anything, but if they play like they did against Rice, they're going to get killed by Alabama. Now, I think they'll be obviously more locked in. This is the biggest game in the country. It's maybe the biggest game of the season. If they live up to the hype, if Texas beats Alabama in Alabama, I think Texas can win the SEC. They can win the national championship. And if they beat Alabama, they should be number 1 in the nation, because it's about what you've done. It's not about the preseason. It's not about the hype. I get it. Georgia, back-to-back champions. That's got nothing to do with this season. If Texas can win in Alabama, which I'm not convinced they can, but if they can, then they should be number one right now.
We got another question, Aaron. Who's the next one that we've got from SEC Matt? By the way, he says SEC Matt meets SEC Mike. He changed that just to he ran out of the Big 12. He is preemptive, so he's got his everything there. So SEC Matt meets SEC Mike's. Is Tennessee and Georgia the top dogs in the SEC this year? Also, would you trade Florida for Florida State?
I don't know if I would. I mean, these Florida State people have been brutal to me, so I don't know if I would trade them, but I certainly would trade Mike Norvell for Billy Napier because I don't. I mean, that guy's just awful. So, but I'm sorry. What was the first question? Georgia and Tennessee, are they the teams to beat?
Tennessee and Georgia the top dogs in the SEC this year?
I would say no on Tennessee. I don't think they're there on the line of scrimmage. I'm still not sold on Joe Milton. I mean, he looked all right in the opener. They play Texas A&M this year in Neyland Stadium, so Tennessee will have the home field advantage, but Texas A&M should have a big advantage on the line of scrimmage. So I think I would put A&M above Tennessee, and right now I'd probably still put Alabama ahead of Tennessee as well. So I think we're talking Georgia, Alabama, A&M, Tennessee, and LSU in that mix. But keep your eye on Ole Miss too. That's another one I think could be really underrated. They won by like 70 points in their opener. They were playing an FCS team though, so I'm not getting too excited about Ole Miss. But and then one dark horse, Kentucky. That's a team to really keep your eye on. They have, I think, the best defensive coordinator in the SEC, and Brad White. They brought in a transfer quarterback from NC State who started slow, but they brought back their offensive coordinator, Liam Cohen, who was the offensive coordinator of the Rams last year. They have a lot of weapons at Kentucky, and they host Alabama late in the season, and they seem to always give Georgia their best game out of the East. So Kentucky and Ole Miss, I would put them in a different tier, but those are two kind of dark horses.
That's a Kentucky. When you start talking about that's amazing as well. All right, let's get into a couple of more here for you. Everyone's firing away. I told you guys you would love them. I promised you this. Sam Shepard asks, how will the environment and stadium be in Bama? It's the first visit, for Texas. Many Texas fans for this generation at least. So, what's the stadium like? And as a preference, most people have said that I've had on the show that's kind of okay environment, but definitely not one of the rowdies in the SEC.
I mean, that's probably fair to say just because they're so spoiled, but I don't think it's going to be fair to say this coming Saturday. This is going to be a huge game, and they've only lost 2 home games in 10 years. Now, that's probably more of a credit to them having an elite roster and an elite coach and all this. So I'm not saying they're unbeatable at home, but that is one hell of a tough place to come out of there with a win. And I think it's going to be out on another level. I've talked to some Alabama people they're saying this is probably the biggest home game since 2019 when they hosted Joe Burrow LSU, and LSU went in there and won. So that's one of those 2 losses that they came away with. But it's going to be a wild environment, night game, obviously. So I think this is probably going to be the toughest environment Texas faces all year.
Texas Boy has a super chat that's come in. I think this is kind of a question here. He goes, Affleck commercial stars the present Bama coach and the future head coach, which would be Deion Sanders. So he put it in the super chat. So I might as well ask: is this a foreshadowing of the future in your opinion? I think he's joking a little.
I don't think it'll be Deion, but I can also tell you who it's not going to be, and that's Lane Kiffin, who a lot of people assume Lane Kiffin is going to be tied to that Alabama job. He's always kissing Saban's ass these days, if you notice, because he's trying to get that Alabama job. But I have heard it from, I don't want to say who, but very, very reliable, someone that would know that when Kiffin was down there, this is directly the quote I was given. He screwed so many important man's wives down there that they will never let him touch that Alabama job. So it ain't going to be Lane Kiffin, but it'll be fascinating to see who it is, because a lot of people think Dabo, but Dabo's kind of, I don't know. I mean, the way he's not adapting to NIL and transfer portal, it's not going to be him. I mean, Could it be Sarkisian? I don't know. I mean, I would almost argue Texas is a better job. I don't think Alabama after Nick Saban, I don't think that's a good job because the expectation is going to be so much. Kirby Smart sure as hell's not taking it. He's from Georgia. He went to Georgia. So that's going to be fascinating to see. But I bet the guy after Nick Saban, he's probably going to fail miserably.
Who is your attorney that you could just say whatever you want to say without fear of repercussion? Like whoever your attorney is, whoever you have on a retainer, Mike, he must be amazing because you are as unfiltered could be. I love it. I absolutely love it. And if you do get sued, I will support your GoFundMe for your legal fund. All right, let's. I know you got to go soon, so let me just ask you. Texas, Bama this weekend. You know a lot about Bama. Obviously, you saw Texas last season. They gave Bama a run for their money. That's a game where Texas had the opportunity to win. There was a safety that wasn't called in the end zone. Texas misses a 20-yard field goal. That could have changed the game. We know that Bryce Young, he just had a Houdini act, gets out of a tackle and extends it. But it's a game. And, of course, Quinn Ewers gets hurt. And so it's always that what if, what could have been. He was on fire in the first half. Yeah, I know you saw Rice as well. I'm just kind of get your thoughts on the game itself, and just give me your thoughts overall as we go into it.
Yeah, I mean, I think this game is really going to come down to how well Texas, and particularly that offensive line, how well can they run the ball, and how well can they protect Quinn Ewers. I mean, I think it's as simple as that. Alabama up front is not as good as they typically under Nick Saban have been. So that is something that I think Texas can take advantage of. Now they've got to be able to stop Alabama. That'll be critical as well. Running the ball in particular, they ran it really well against MTSU, but based on everything I've seen, that's basically going into the strength of the Texas defense. So I think Texas can hold their own. They're not going to suffocate them by any means, but yeah, how well can they run the ball against Alabama? I think the game is going to come down to that. Texas should have the advantage in their receiving core and their great tight end going up against Alabama's secondary. Kool-Aid McKinstry is fantastic, but the rest of the guys just kind of so-so, and they have a couple guys banged up in their secondary, Alabama does. So, again, I think Texas will have an advantage in that aspect, but it's not going to matter if they can't protect, if this offensive line doesn't live up to the hype. That was paramount when they played Arkansas a couple years ago. Texas learned real quick. They are not ready for life in the SEC up front. That was a couple years ago now. So they've recruited well. I've heard they've developed well. So that's going to be paramount to this football game and just handling the crowd noise. I mean, it's like I said, 2 wins in 10 years for visiting opponents going to Alabama. Can they make it a high-scoring game? I think that certainly favors Texas because as well as Jalen Milroe played in the opener, his style does not suit a high-scoring game unless Texas has a bunch of turnovers or something. So, to me, it's going to come down to how well Texas can run the ball, control that line of scrimmage. That's going to decide this one in my mind.
And the last one I asked you is a Jalen Milroe question. Are you buying it, right? Does the Middle Tennessee negate for you everything you saw last season, or do you have to look at that in the bubble and say, okay, that was Middle Tennessee, but let me see him do this against a Texas that has a good defense? Because that's the one thing you did, as you point out, that Texas had some struggles on the offensive line, but defensively they played incredibly well against Rice. Limited, they got a turnover. The defensive line was really strong. They were in the backfield a lot. So I'm just kind of curious. Do you need to see this against this Texas defense for you to buy some Jalen Milroe stock?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not fully bought in on him whatsoever just by beating Middle Tennessee. And I'll tell you, Anwar, I mean, this is how sad and sorry the decaying dynasty is at right now. Since I've said that about a dozen times, maybe it's fair, but all these Alabama fans are coming after me. You see us beat MTSU? You see us? And I'm like, my God, I can't remember a Nick Saban team proud to beat MTSU. I mean, that's a game where usually the fans don't even show up because you're expected to win. You're expected to win impressively, and they did that. So I'll give them credit. But it's sad to me that they're boasting about that. And I think it's because in reality, they know their team is about to go up in flames. And again, I expect this to be a very tight ball game. Gun to my head, I probably pick Alabama to win it, Texas to cover. But if Texas can live up to the hype and those receivers show up, they'll beat Alabama on Saturday.
Mike, tell everyone where to find you. Tell everyone about the podcast. Everybody, I need you to follow him on Twitter. I need him to have a flood of Longhorn fans. All you people who've been in the chat, everything, you need to follow. So go ahead and tell everybody, and I need everyone to support him. You guys love him, and then you make sure you support him. So SEC, tell them where they find you.
Yeah, absolutely. On Twitter, Michael W. Bratton, but the best way to find me is just search SEC Mike, and I'll come up. The show is That SEC Podcast. It's the highest rated SEC podcast on Apple and Spotify. We're on YouTube now as well. We got a ton of momentum on YouTube, and I've been putting Texas and Oklahoma in all my rankings, my power rankings. We're covering them this year. Like I said, watching every game. And if you go to my pinned tweet, it's power rankings every Saturday night. As soon as the final SEC game's done, I update the power rankings. And it is a shit show for about a week. People bitching, complaining. And like I said, Texas is in these this year. So you'll see what I think of your team. And I go live on YouTube right after I publish them to kind of break those down. And that's kind of the most entertaining thing we do every week.
Oh, man. I wish I could have you for longer. I would love to have you more because I'd love to give your A&M thoughts as well. But hey, quick, just give me – and by the way, I'm on no time crunch. I'm just trying to be respectful to your time. Yeah. Any just thoughts on A&M this season, real quick?
Yeah, I mean, this is thank God we've got Jimbo Fisher's hands off the offense and the quarterbacks, because this is what I said on Paul Feinbaum's show. Again, that's on my YouTube page. If you've not checked it out, I was with Paul live on Broadway a week ago, but he asked same thing. What do you think about A&M? And I mean, hiring Bobby Petrino, that may be the move of the offseason, because Jimbo Fisher does not know what he's doing calling an offense. He doesn't know what he's doing calling the plays. And it's kind of sad that we got this $100 million coach and we got a coach around him, but they seemingly have found a way to do that. So Connor Wigman looked sharp as hell. They got great receivers. Again, it was New Mexico. Try not to go overboard. But, I mean, they blew their doors off, and they have the defensive line, which is something you notice I keep referencing. That's the most critical position in the SEC, offense and defensive line. They bring back everybody on the offensive line. It was not a great offensive line last year, so that's good and bad, I guess. But the defensive line, I think, could be the best in the SEC, which makes them a serious contender as long as they continue to be high-flying on offense. They were pushing the ball down the field every series. They were throwing it deep. That's what you have to do to get people to respect that passing game. And it was lights out in the opener. Again, it was a joke of an opponent. I can give you a better idea this week after they play Miami. I expect them to beat Miami. If they don't, I'll be sitting here trashing them. Trust me.
And listen, you guys follow SEC Mike, support him, support the podcast, Longhorn Nation. This guy is absolutely great. Mike, everyone on the chats, I don't know if you can see it on the side of the screen, absolutely love you. Absolutely have just been saying great things about you. You've been straight fire. Super happy. So remember, hey, whenever you need me on, you just let me know. You know, you're my dude. Like I said, I don't like a lot of people, but I love you. So thank you for coming on this morning. I really appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right. SEC Mike Bratton.